When Japan surrendered in August 1945, the world thought the war was over. But in Tokyo, a different kind of battle was already raging, a race against time to erase everything the world was never meant to see. Before the emperor's voice echoed across the radio, before the mushroom clouds cooled over Hiroshima and Nagasaki, hundreds of men in black uniforms carried boxes, not of weapons, but of secrets. And as the Allied ships approached the Japanese coast, those men were given one final order, an order so secret it wasn't written down, it was whispered. Burn everything, leave nothing behind. Tokyo, August 14, 1945. The city was silent, except for the distant hum of engines and the crackle of flames. In basements beneath the Imperial Army Ministry, soldiers fed documents into furnaces. Papers stamped "Top Secret, Imperial Directive" vanished into smoke. One soldier, Private Sato, hesitated. He pulled a file from the pile, its title handwritten in English, Project Mizu, Phase 3. He looked at it for a moment. Then, quietly, he slipped it into his uniform. The next morning, Japan surrendered. For the first time, the Japanese people heard the emperor's voice. He said, "We must endure the unendurable." But no one mentioned the other message that had gone out an hour earlier, to every government department, every military division, every laboratory. Destroy all sensitive material immediately. When Allied forces entered Japan, they expected to find plans for weapons and logistics. What they found instead were ghosts, fragments of paper, half-burned photographs, and scattered ledgers that made no sense. But among the ruins, U.S. intelligence recovered one box the fire missed. Its contents were charred, but legible enough to reveal two words that would haunt history: human experimentation. 1. Those words led investigators north, to Manchuria, to a place that survivors whispered about but no one dared to name, Unit 731. It was here that the Imperial Japanese Army performed unspeakable experiments, testing biological weapons on prisoners of war and civilians. Thousands died. And before surrender, the scientists had burned nearly all the evidence. But what few knew was that the Americans had arrived too late. The fire was still burning, and the ashes told their own story. Syringes, scalpels, surgical tools melted beyond recognition, and one iron sign half buried in the mud: Department of Epidemic Prevention and Water Purification. File. The files Sato hid in his uniform were discovered by Allied officers weeks later. Inside, handwritten notes described experiments on frostbite endurance and pathogen behavior in living tissue. There were names, dates, and chilling descriptions of tests performed for the Empire's future. The soldiers who found them didn't understand everything, but they knew enough. These weren't war plans. They were war crimes. When General MacArthur learned of these documents, he faced a choice: expose Japan's crimes to the world, or take what the scientists knew and use it. In 1946, a secret agreement was made. Unit 731's data would be transferred to the U.S. Army in exchange for immunity. Every surviving scientist walked free. None were ever tried in court. The files were reclassified, sealed, and shipped to Washington, D.C. Officially, they did not exist. Unofficially, they became the foundation of early Cold War biological research. For decades, no one spoke of them again. Until 1984, when a Japanese construction crew uncovered an underground vault in Tokyo. Inside, ceramic jars, bones, and papers sealed in oilcloth. On the jars were Japanese characters that translated to specimen. Inside those jars, human remains. The government denied any connection to Unit 731, but the handwriting on the documents matched those from the burned archives. The truth was resurfacing, piece by piece. In the 1990s, a few surviving victims and witnesses came forward. Old men and women, their hands trembling as they spoke. They remembered the smell of chemicals, the white coats, and the silence. They said, "We weren't soldiers, we were numbers." Their stories matched the fragments from Sato's file almost word for word. Private Sato, the man who saved the file, lived in silence for 40 years. Before his death in 1987, he left a note for his grandson. "Tell them what I saw. Tell them we burned the truth." That letter became evidence in Japan's first public hearing on wartime experiments. Historians later confirmed the truth he referred to was the existence of over 10,000 documents destroyed in the final 72 hours before surrender. Files that detailed chemical warfare, virus production, and human testing. American translators spent nights hunched over half-burned pages. Each word was like a ghost. Japanese, English, German, mixed together in code. One translator whispered, "They weren't destroying reports. They were destroying a collaboration." In 2002, newly declassified U.S. files revealed what the world had long suspected. The American military not only kept Japan's research, they expanded it. Projects in Maryland, Alaska, and Guam used data taken directly from Unit 731's experiments. Even some of the scientists had been relocated to the U.S. under new identities. A memo from 1947 read, "The knowledge obtained is invaluable to our national security. Ethical concerns are secondary." Among the ruins of the Health Ministry, a single binder was found intact. The title, Operation Suzaku. Inside, letters between Japanese scientists and a German counterpart in 1944. They spoke of new forms of energy release and biological control. No signatures, only initials, HK and WB. Testimonies later revealed that even after the emperor's surrender, senior officers demanded that every document that could shame the nation be erased. Soldiers wept as they burned pages. Some whispered prayers before throwing files into the furnace. Others simply stared, knowing history was dying before their eyes. Weeks later, Allied patrols followed the smell of smoke to an old sake factory. Inside, rows of barrels filled with ash and melted metal. Stamped across the lids, Medical Division 731, Confidential. It wasn't sake inside. It was history turned to dust. Captured Japanese officers were questioned under bright lamps. When asked about Unit 731, most said they'd never heard of it. But their hands trembled when shown the recovered photos. A few whispered, "We were ordered not to remember." Others simply asked for water, then refused to speak again. General MacArthur received a memo stamped Urgent Ethical Issue. It warned, data from Japan's medical programs is extensive, but morally catastrophic. MacArthur looked out the window and said quietly, "Sometimes peace requires silence." That silence would last decades. In October 1945, a train left Kyoto carrying 10 sealed crates labeled biological samples. It never reached its destination. Witnesses saw smoke rising near the mountains and soldiers digging through the ashes at dawn. No official report was ever filed. Meanwhile, Soviet forces occupying northern China uncovered tunnels under a frozen field. Inside were cages, tables, and broken glass marked 731. The Soviets photographed everything, then sealed the tunnels forever. Those photos disappeared into archives for 40 years. An anonymous envelope reached a U.S. embassy clerk. Inside, a single sentence written in shaky English. "They did not destroy all. Some were saved for you." No one knew who sent it. But 2 days later, the clerk was reassigned to Washington. One final fire blazed behind the Imperial Army Medical College. Locals said the night sky glowed orange, like the war had started again. When the flames died, the only thing left was a steel plate fused to the ground. Carved into it by heat were 2 words: "No witness." The empire fell in silence, but its secrets screamed as they burned. In February 1946, inside a former Japanese government building, Allied soldiers discovered a locked basement door welded shut from the outside. When they forced it open, they found shelves lined with glass jars, each filled with liquid amber. Inside each jar, something human. The discovery was kept secret. The jars were loaded into trucks under tarps and moved to a restricted dock. Only a handful of officers were allowed to log their existence. Officially, the basement contained chemical materials. Unofficially, it contained evidence of hell. In the weeks that followed, Allied officers hunted surviving members of Unit 731. One of them, Dr. Kenji Tanimura, refused to flee. He surrendered willingly and said, "I can explain everything, but only to the Americans." They flew him to Tokyo, then he vanished. His name never appeared again in any record. A memo dated March 3, 1946. All Japanese scientific personnel involved in epidemic research to receive immunity in exchange for full data disclosure. The memo bore a U.S. Army seal. Justice was traded for knowledge, and knowledge became a weapon. MacArthur's intelligence chief met privately with senior officers. He opened a box, showing them photographs from the vault, bodies, frostbite wounds, notes in Japanese and English. He said quietly, "Gentlemen, this is information the Soviets must never have." And just like that, the crimes of war became property. Plain manifests showed dozens of boxes shipped from Japan to Maryland under medical supply research. Each crate carried files marked Water Purification Division, a phrase that once disguised Unit 731's true name. Every document was carefully translated, cataloged, and stamped, top secret. But the Soviets already knew. In Khabarovsk, 1949, they held their own war crimes trial. Witnesses described epidemic experiments on humans. The U.S. called it propaganda, but the transcripts matched the burned files exactly. Decades later, a historian in Kyoto discovered microfilm inside a temple bell. It contained images of surgical tools, frostbite tests, and chemical maps. The microfilm was labeled, "Copy for safety, August 9, 1945. Someone inside Unit 731 had tried to preserve proof, not for revenge, but remembrance. 1951, Fort Detrick, Maryland. Researchers examined the data under a new project name, Operation Paper Sun. They never mentioned Japan. But one scientist wrote in his diary, "This material came from Tokyo. It's too detailed to be theory." Soon after, that scientist resigned. Over the years, survivors who tried to speak out faced accidents, disappearances, or discrediting. One nurse who testified about human experiments in Harbin was found drowned in the Sumida River. Police ruled it suicide. Her diary was never recovered. In 1961, construction workers uncovered an underground chamber near Tokyo University. Inside, broken tables, jars, and scalpels rusted in place. The government sealed the site within days, Official reason? Unstable structure. Unofficial reason? Undeniable truth. Documents declassified decades later revealed that in 1963, American, British, and Japanese scientists met secretly in Okinawa. They discussed frostbite treatment, viral containment, and cultural amnesia. Minutes from that meeting ended with one phrase: "Continue the silence, the world isn't ready."